Okay, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. All right, so Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I am today with a very, very special guest, Suleiman Levi Rowe himself. And for those of you who are not following him yet on Facebook, please start doing it so, because he's got a really special message to Muslim male population. Uh, Brother Suleiman, he's working as a mental health professional for years now, for decades, more than years now. So he's got expertise there. But also, what happened to be, if I am not going to embarrass you too much with this statement, he had been inspired by whatever forces you can imagine, to go out there and raise awareness about trauma, but trauma from the very specific angle. Am I right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Hi.
Hi, yeah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. And thanks for the elegant introduction. Make me sound a lot better than I actually am. I may Allah forgive us for our shortcomings. But
I mean,
as you said, my sister, working as a mental health nurse, and I've worked in the mental health field for about 24 years. I think I probably look a lot younger than I actually am. Um,
mashallah, Mubarak.
MashaAllah, Allahu barak alayhi, ameen. Um, but it's quite apparent that we come across a lot of service users who, at the core of their experiences, is trauma, and this actually has an effect specific to the Muslim community, from the sense that, one, it's a taboo, mental health in and of itself, but also trauma is also a taboo and a stigmatized subject. Um, so essentially, what can happen is that the husband, when he's about to marry or matched with a suitor or meets somebody, perhaps these issues like trauma aren't necessarily discussed and may manifest as the relationship starts to develop, um, where there could be an array of symptoms suggestive of trauma that become quite apparent, which I'm sure you're going to be talking about, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, it's such a vast subject. People study it for years. People are training in it for years. Trauma in itself, it's absolutely massive. And as everything right now, unfortunately, in our community, is still a taboo. It's still sort of developing area. It's still in a in a really toddlerish steps. We have privilege to have access to NHS, like this here in UK, free services, but once assessed that it's trauma, there's no place really to go. Unless you rely on your either referrals, and for most private resources. So I think just to make everyone else understand what is it, what degree, what matter it is that trauma represents in our line of work. Let's just show you this slide. Trauma can be anything, and I don't think we really understand. We don't comprehend really uh, how big T trauma can be, and how small T trauma can also become in our life. So we have car accident, domestic violence, disasters, racism. I mean, we talking about it in 2023. Crazy stuff are going on. In Palestine, our hearts are bleeding. As Muslims, we are watching, really living, not even reliving, living that war, and that is very disastrous. This is a crisis. This is a crisis. This is injustice. This is the trauma to all of us right now in the very moment. We as Muslims, we even on that subject, we are discriminated. We are suffering racism, marginalism. You call it double standards in media, especially. Uh, so we can't escape. We can't escape from trauma as a human, but we can't escape from the double trauma as a minority living in the West as well, or as Muslims living in 21st century either. And the list carries on. Poverty, abuse, community violence, forced displacements, love and losses of one. And then we have small, minute traumas. Um, Emotional eruptions, unpredictability. How do you deal with unpredictability in your life? If you can take unknown, then probably you are not traumatized. But if you are going into depression and anxiety straight away, then I would, as a therapist, sit and think, maybe there's an underlying trauma there.
Yeah.
Silent treatments. I mean, I have clients coming to me, and you have clients coming to you with relationship issues. Silent treatment is one of the first on the list, especially for people who are traumatized. And no, it's not. It's not attached to men only. Women also do silent treatment. They do, don't they?
Yeah, yeah,
Suleiman.
absolutely.
Yeah. So it's quite broad. And then we also have um we have um we have um situations which we don't recognize as a trauma necessarily. But if somebody is suffering with symptoms such as concentration, self-esteem, emotional regulation, even they struggle with recognizing colors or perception, spatial perception. They have intrusive imaginary, like we would call them flashbacks, but it doesn't have to be a flashback. It could literally be visualization, like you completely zooming out from the reality. Um, uh, um, and um, and even before you've been recognized with complex trauma or with fancy word called vicarious trauma, uh, those symptoms that you're experiencing, um, let me show you something else. There you go. Those symptoms which you experiencing, they can well be just anxiety, depression, but those symptoms, they come from somewhere. And our job as professional health practitioners is to assess where exactly they're coming from. So, have a look at that list. Are you free from those things? Are you free from those symptoms? Anger, anxiety, panic attacks, sadness, guilt, shame, depression, emotional numbness, lack of interest, avoidance of activities. I have so many clients coming to me. I'm procrastinating. I just can't move beyond that point. And then you have confusions, nightmares, disorientation, mood swings. I have women coming to me. I think I'm being hormonal. And I ask, what do you mean? Oh, I have mood swings. And I'm sitting and I'm thinking, and what happened in your life? Not now, but like maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago. And then we most likely we do open this Pandora box, and there are tragedies that happened, something that they might not even realize that they were tragedies. And I could carry on, but this is not a webinar. This is not a place when we actually educating about trauma. This is a place when we taking subject of trauma to another level, from unconscious to here right now. I have to deal with it. What is it that I'm dealing with it? Because I'm a spouse of traumatized person and I don't have a tools. This is your arena, isn't it, Brother Suleiman? This is what your clients have to deal with. And that is traumatizing in itself, I would imagine as well. Not
Yeah,
knowing. Yeah.
absolutely. I think your slides really summed it up very well. And I suppose just to add to that, when you have um, the 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 shame that is attached to those experiences, then you have anxiety to keep it a secret and silent because of a fear of judgment. So it may be not so easy to express why you're feeling the ways in which you feel. But at the same time, these behaviors are manifesting. And sometimes people don't understand what the triggers or where these behaviors are coming from. And I've got a saying that, if we know, as the common saying goes, that knowledge is power. Well, if that is the case, then ignorance about yourself is a weapon of mass destruction. So when you don't understand yourself and how you operate, um, then you're left with this sense of shame, because then you internalize these behaviors as you as a bad person. You're doing it because you're a bad person. You're messed up. You're screwed up. And then what's going to be projected to the partner? So it brings us to perhaps what are some of the incentives behind a husband wanting to be there for his partner in a way that sort of nurtures connection as well as healing, but at the same time, how do they safeguard their own psychological well-being? And it goes back down to, the intention. As the hadith of Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, he says, actions are judged by the intention. So we have to start with our niyyah, our intention, you know. Um, there's a good author called Simon Sinek. He wrote a real good book called Starting with Why. And he mentions the inside out approach to care, to business, actually, sorry. But I apply this to care, that when you have an inside out approach, starting with your niyyah and that connection to your faith, that this is an action that is beloved to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And those who help their brother or sister in a time of need, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would help them. So we understanding that this is a journey that goes far beyond just you and your spouse, but this is a journey that is actually connected to ibadah and our duty towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah will make that journey easy. Now, from my experience of working with men with these that are in these circumstances, sometimes they can fall into the trap of feeling, well, is this going to be my life forever? But a part of that, that trust and that reliance, that tawakkul upon Allah, is that we know that Allah will make the affair easy for you if your intention is pure. Because if the intention isn't pure and you don't accept the amana, that this is a trust from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you could cause more damage as a male, as a husband, because you can cause re-traumatization. Things like, the silent treatment and gaslighting and things of that nature, really.
I like what you said, Brother Suleiman, about Mia and how it is almost it is almost forward on us, to help another brother and another sister, and that is a perspective which I don't think majority of us remember when we are in relationships, unfortunately. Meaning, what I'm trying to say is that if you are in relationship with a spouse, it is not only about what can I get out from you,
Absolutely.
but how can I, through us, please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or maybe more egoistically, and my Jannah. And if we swap that mindset and we become a partner for khair, I'm not I'm not saying partner, we're changing partnership into a care house. I'm not encouraging anyone by any means to become a carer for traumatized partner, because that is not a way forward. You're not their parent, you're not their father, you're not their mother, you're not their sister. You are there to have your rights met, but also they are there to have their rights met, and their rights are somehow of a different notion than yours because they're healing from trauma. And we know that Quran affirms for us, for every disease there is a remedy apart from
Absolutely.
death. So
Absolutely.
as long as you hear, your job, my job, those clients of your job is to educate themselves in what is it that they deal with. They're not dealing with marital disputes, they're dealing with trauma. They themselves being re-traumatized, talking about vicarious trauma, and they partners, their wives, they are maybe struggling to even name it. Maybe they're still living in denial. So in that sense, you as a couple, you becoming duly responsible for your own well-being. In the end of the day, it is a manna placed on your shoulders to look after yourself. So if you're affected by your partner, you better do your job for the sake of your afia, but also for they, because they will always affect you. You are in with relationship with them. They have children with you. Maybe they have children from other relationship. They have luggages that they brought to this relationship. And guess what? You too. You also have luggages. And as much as you are required to be the remedy, I'm not saying parent, I'm not saying parent, the remedy, in the same way they are your remedy. In the same
Absolutely.
way they are your remedy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really like how you're using the notion of niyyah. Why am I here? What am I getting out of it? Could I do any better with somebody else? Uh, we all have this waswas. I love how honest you are about it. And then going back to the thought, yes, yes, we need to give nasiha to each other. And if we don't know how to give nasiha, hire somebody. And if you can't hire somebody, educate yourself to the point when you know what you're dealing with. I really couldn't help but emphasize that point for you, Brother Salim. I'm sorry, over to you.
And I think really it's a real key point what you just mentioned about accepting that this is our problem. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a her problem or his problem. This becomes the couple's problem. This
Mm.
is an issue that we have together, whether or not someone wants to disclose or not, or how much they disclose is a different question altogether. But it's very clear that it's the husband's mindset has to be one of, do you know what? I need to I need to man up. I need to be in a position where I can influence beyond my sphere of influence. Um, Meaning, you know, sometimes you won't have the capabilities and you won't have the skills. But what does it look like for you to be in a position where you can influence in a way and in a manner that is trauma informed? So I'm a big believer of, harnessing an environment, relationships, workplaces, organizations, homes that are trauma informed. Because when something or someone is trauma informed, they consider the trauma of themselves and of other people. So I think if getting away from that notion that I'm not here to care or babysit for somebody else, that's right. But as a husband, it's our responsibility to lead. And if we look at leadership not from a perspective of oppression and exploitation, which is contrary to this concept of amana, but we're looking at leadership from a place of influence. How do I influence my family, my wife, in a way that is conducive to growth and healing? So it's important that, we really do start from that inner place of acceptance that, what, this is what I'm going to be doing. These are the skills and the capabilities that I need in order for me to influence my family in the direction that is conducive for growth and healing.
But Suleiman, I couldn't agree with you more. You are actually touching on something that is a real issue in our community, Muslim masculinity. That's what I hear from you. Man up. Again, the fact that you're not scared to use the right words as well. This is amazing. But yeah, absolutely, we are talking about masculinity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And sister, it's from the perspective that it's easy for us to, especially in 2023, it's easy for us to gain size, muscle, eat protein, go to the gym. But we have to return it back to what the Prophet ﷺ said, what strength was. He said it wasn't about, lifting heavy weights. It was about your ability to control your anger when you're
Yeah.
able to display it. So really, when we go to a level of reacting to the emotions and the sensitivities of our partner, then it makes us equally as feminine. So we have to man up. It boils down to us being a rajul, being a man. And that means being in touch with our sensitive side. That means listening and developing listening skills and understanding what empathy is, what compassion is, and the role that it plays, rather than, feeding our own innate insecurities that we all have. But if you're not aware of your own insecurities, as I said, and ignorance about yourself is a weapon of mass destruction, because if we don't continually revisit our own insecurities, how may that project into the relationships that we're trying to harness? Um, so it's very important, of acceptance.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, what comes to my mind is that big, massive argument that Prophet Sallallahu had with his wives,
Sallallahu
because
alaihi
they were
wasallam.
starting demanding more rights, more risk coming their way. In the end of the day, they were the wives of the Prophet, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So how Prophet ﷺ dealt with it, he took a step back for the first time after years and years and years. Have you noticed? Came back to his cave Hira. He
yeah.
haven't been there since Khadija.
Mm,
He haven't been retrieving to his man cave since Khadija times,
yeah,
since actually announcement of 5 daily prayers. So that's how difficult that situation was for him. It was not enough for him to pray. He needed to take a step back. It's called in our language withdrawing. And everyone was asking themselves, even the Prophet, are you going to divorce them then? Is that what's going to happen? Are you going to divorce them? But the Prophet, ﷺ, he used that time,
so,
he gathered himself and he came down to his wives, had a meeting, and he recontracted something that I really think is important in our relationships. Recontract. Are we going to stay together? This is what I can provide, and these are the limits, these are the boundaries. If that's not good enough, as much as I love you and I want to have a life with you, we need to part if that's not good enough for you.
yeah,
And they all made choice to stay in despite the discomfort. Listen to this. Despite the discomfort that this relationship was causing for them, it was not easy to be wife of the Prophet ﷺ. We love them, they are our mothers, but the conditions were tough.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And if you are with traumatized, and they also suffered traumas, we are as a no, as a nation, as a nation of the Prophet ﷺ, re-traumatized after re-traumatized, generationally re-traumatized people. We
Absolutely.
have to own that.
Yeah,
It's not new to us. We just don't think it that way. So, so they chosen to stay in re-traumatizing relationship, re-traumatizing reality for what? For what? They
yeah,
had their reasons there, and I think we also need to stay in our relationship if we are talking about re-traumatization, vicarious trauma, and ask ourselves questions. Is this kind of overlap? What is it that I need to learn here? What is it that I need to learn here? And how can I recontract this relationship so it works for her and it works for me? We don't do that. We
absolutely.
really don't do that. We do go back to the man cave, but we don't come back ready like Professor Islam did. Or am
Yeah.
I wrong?
No, I think you're absolutely right, and then I think that the recontracting really comes down as well to a certain extent to effective communication. You know, how
Yeah,
how are we
absolutely.
going to communicate in a way that is effective? Because sometimes we have these experiences that's clearly having an impact on us, but we don't necessarily know why it's having an impact or why we're feeling in the way that we are. And this is true with someone who's experienced this trauma or someone who hasn't. But from that story, that beautiful story, the narration that you just spoke of, it really does highlight this effective communication, really being clear about what are your boundaries, and having them firmly established, and what are the objectives, and being clear as to what those objectives are, that everybody is clear and heading in the same direction. So I think absolutely it's this notion of starting with yourself is something that I'm a big advocate of, even within my nurse capacity. That you can't, as the saying goes, you can't pour from an empty vessel. So we have to realize that there's a direct link between our ability to care compassionately, um, and how we look after ourselves. And there's various phenomena that sort of speak to that notion, in the sense that that we have there's literature about and thoughts about compassion fatigue and empathic distress and moral injury and burnout. And these are real true phenomena that can really destroy relationships if people don't look after themselves. So it's understanding that taking on responsibility is quite often heavy. So if something's heavy, we got to become stronger. Goes hand in hand.
Yeah, like really balance your life, and understand not only trauma in relationship, how it's affecting her, how it's affecting me, but also treat it almost like a separate entity, like a guest in your relationship, hopefully for a very limited period of time, because every trauma is healable. This is my new word that I've just come up with.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
understand that taking step out from relationship for the purpose of self-care is actually not escaping from relationship, but is contributing to a stronger version of this relationship for both parties. Actually, for both parties, we as couple counselors, we do show this. What does it mean in relationships? You come together to stay together, and you hard because you also are individuals and you need your private space, and then you coupling again and you decoupling. So
Absolutely.
whether you have trauma or not trauma in relationships, it's a really important habit to embrace. But if you are with a person who suffered trauma, then what happened is codependency. And I think for men, it is very difficult to have very needy women if they don't understand what's going on there, because it's not reflecting them at all. It is all about unfulfilled, unresolved issues of their wife. Have you come across that as well? That is
Yeah,
normal.
yeah, I've come across it a lot, because this is one of the issues, because men often feel as though they're causing re-traumatization. Men become very anxious about the triggers, especially in the early stages. There's going to be a lot of triggers that neither of them know about. It's probably a newly married couple, um, and there could be something that triggers either one of them, and the response could be disproportionate, and it may induce a lack of understanding and anxiety, because they don't know. All right, they feel like they're walking on eggshells. So definitely this codependency, and then starting to not look after yourself and put in your partner's needs before your own, as a means of appeasing, which is an anxiety response as well, or as a means of escaping conflict, or not having to deal with the volcano type of eruption.
Yeah.
Um, so these are things that really are a major pain point for a lot of men that I work with, and many people have different experiences as well. But it boils down to acknowledging this vicarious trauma, acknowledging and
Mm.
accepting that you yourself can be affected, and that there's no shame in that. But also, my number one is really work on your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because within the Quran and with the Sunnah, Islam, it gives us the remedies that we need. For example, as my worker, I work as a registered nurse, although more in a management capacity now, but I've worked in the front line for many years and in very extreme circumstances, intensive care where people are very unwell, men, aggressive, threatening. And at times we have 13-hour shifts, back to back, and it's very intense. But what I've always had as a means of being able to continue to turn up is my salah. That during those times when the salah comes in, that's literally a break from everything. That is like the cave that the Prophet ﷺ went to. You're taking a retreat away from this whole dunya, and when you're coming back, you come back, refreshed. And there's a lot of research and literature about managing your transitions between events, like between work and between home, between work, between one service user to another service user or a client, right? Those times there are times that we can really capitalize on, really sort of refueling so that we can come back in a better state. Yeah.
I like that. It sounds like a very healthy attitude to stress management, or maybe traumatizing relationship management, and perhaps into spirituality. And I think what I can get from you throughout this interview is that you really advocating for going back to Sunnah, to the example of Prophet ﷺ, because you do mention his qualities. He was very empathetic person. I mean, he could speak to kings and he could speak to beggars, and all of them, they couldn't help whether they reverted into Islam or not. It doesn't really matter. None of them couldn't help but being impressed with his person because of the empathy, but also compassion. Compassion of the Prophet ﷺ was melting people's hearts to the point of reconnecting with fitra. Like famous example, was it a man or woman? I can never remember. A Jewish neighbor who was always throwing a bean in front of his trash in front of his house until she or he got ill, and he went to visit his neighbor, and that's how La ilaha illallah came about. So we don't think about Sunnah that way when we are in difficult relationships, but that Sunnah was there for us all the way through to aid our own transformation. I think that is what is missing in our interview here. When any relationship should transform you into better Sunnah-like, Sunnah-centered version of you, but traumatizing, re-traumatizing, vicariously traumatizing relationship should do it quicker for you, provided that you have your eyes open and your heart open. It's like almost going back to how we started, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
But as you advocating Sunnah for those things, I always advocate Sunnah of taking responsibility for your actions. And what I find in my line of work is that our Muslim men, talking about manhood, I'm sorry, I'm going to complain now, but it is a pattern, and I think it's important to mention it. Our men in situations of difficulties, they go back to their family. They go back to their mothers. And it's either in their head, meaning comparing, they wife to their mothers, or sometimes literally they're moving out and they're going to their mothers. They eat in their mothers, they spend more time in their mother house. So they're looking for that nourishment, they like we try retrieving into their childhood time, and that is enough for them. It almost creates a narrative. Look, she loves me. I'm okay. I'm being respected here. I'm being appreciated for who I am. I'm also being fed, and look after. Why can't I have it from my own home? Why can't I have it in my own home? Whereas what we are saying here today is that, well, manning up, so aligning yourself with Sunnah qualities like compassion, empathy, and taking responsibilities got nothing to do with this. This is escapism. This is not healthy. This is not a method that is going to help you personally but also relationship-wise. Am I summing up it correctly, or am I missing out something, Brother Suleiman? What do
I
you
think
reckon?
I think you summed it up very nicely. And working again, having worked with many women that have experienced trauma and severe, mild to severe mental illnesses, often at the core of their anxieties and fears is this sense of or fear of abandonment. So this abandonment is true is re-traumatizing. This not, escaping from the family home and abandoning the wife is actually, something that really can cause a lot of damage when we're talking about people who have an innate fear of abandonment, and a lot of their behaviors can be generated out of this fear of abandonment, which I think is something that men and husbands have to take into consideration when thinking of an intervention. Because sometimes these interventions, and this is what it is, it's an intervention, but sometimes those interventions are probably not the best, and they need some thought. Um, but just to touch on what you said about bringing it back to the Quran and Sunnah, because the answers were all there. And if you look at a trauma-informed approach, the principles of trustworthiness and transparency, well,
Mhm.
how does that play out within a relationship? It's an essential agreement, and it's essential ingredient. Also, this notion of peer support, collaboration, meaning, speaking to each other and coming to decisions collectively and collaboratively. These are all things that the Prophet ﷺ done throughout his life. Also taking into consideration, your methods of empowering people and empowering your family rather than putting them down and taking and detracting from them. So when we look at these types of modern day principles and approaches, we find them all scattered throughout the Sunnah, in droves. So essentially, it's about us really starting to utilize this existential growth, where we grow spiritually, and using that as the cornerstone to our recovery, really.
Mm. It's like almost, stepping out from your human reaction, from your human experience, and reconnecting with your soul and start asking yourself a question. Okay, there are plenty ayats here around me. What is required from me? What is required from me in relationship to this situation? As a soul, as an eternal being, rather than just this reactionary human,
Yeah,
entitled or privileged spouse of this
absolutely,
traumatized person.
absolutely, yeah.
So, Brother Suleiman, you do have something very special underneath your belt, isn't it? I think we're ready to talk about it right now. And I think we've learned so much, thanks to you, about experience of a man being in relationship with traumatized wife. Now, how is it that you're helping them? Maybe not give us all the tips because we already learned a lot, but what is your program? When do you start? How to hook up with you? Where to find you? What is it really that you've got in your hands that is already proven to help others?
Yeah, so basically, for the since 2020, I developed a program aimed at healthcare professionals, mainly nurses, that are expected to offer care, but quite often the compassion and the care has been separated because of things like burnout, because of things like vicarious trauma. Um, so what I done was developed a program that aims to develop self-efficacy and increase an internal locus of control. So people feel as though they can sort of influence the outcomes of whatever endeavor or whatever circumstance they find themselves in. And that went pretty well. The NHS, I was contracted with the NHS to deliver that to the workforce. Um, but having done Hajj last year, I felt I wanted to do more for the Ummah. And I realized that this is a hot topic that, is taboo, but it's coming to a point where we can no longer escape these conversations about mental health. You know, I oversee, hospital or crisis teams, whereby most people who are admitted in Birmingham have to come through one of my teams. And I see a lot of Muslim names coming into hospital. At times, I've seen up to 90% on our intensive care ward of Muslim names, Muslim people that have been sectioned and detained under the Mental Health Act. So I felt I wanted to do something directed towards the Muslim community. And trauma is something that is personally very dear to me. So I've tweaked that system that I was using for the NHS, and I've developed a coaching course aimed at Muslim males, to help them to become trauma informed, to help them develop an internal locus of control, feeling as though they're confident as well as compassionate, and giving them the skills and the capabilities to be able to deal with these relationships in a way that is conducive to growth, both spiritually and externally. So that course is called Men Tools for my company is called Men Tools for Health. It's a brand new company. It's a new initiative. um, it's been going for a couple of months now. It's
Beautiful.
doing pretty well. And you can contact me via WhatsApp or email me. Should I give my details here, or should you gonna?
Yes, especially underneath this video. So this video is available in a Facebook group. So everyone who's in my Facebook group, they actually, as we speak, already asking you questions. So
Okay.
when we finish, you have quite a questions to address. Inshallah,
Okay.
have a good time. And and if you could drop some links so people can actually connect with you, because we do have few men in this group as well, more than few.
Yeah.
And same thing in YouTube. I will make sure that under my YouTube video, people will know how to get in touch with you. So for now, we're going to wrap up. And here in Sunnah Wellness and Islamic Wellbeing group in Facebook, we're going to continue chatting with our viewers. And thank you for watching, all of you, inshallah. We coming back to you right now as we speak. But for now, we're going to say. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you plenty tawfiq in your endeavors. It really sounds like it's a basira induced project. It can't go wrong. It can only benefit you and other brothers. I mean,
Inshallah, inshallah, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. Wa iyyak, my sister.
thank you. All
Thank
right, so that's from us for now. Look up for new webinars like this, inshallah, with me as a host, and sign up to my YouTube channel, AJ's Therapy. I see you later. Thank you again, Brother Sulaiman. Salam alaikum.